The morning sky over the Normandy coast was pale and steel gray, heavy with mist and tension. The Atlantic stretched endlessly, churning beneath thousands of Allied ships moving steadily forward. Each formation was precise but fragile, carrying men, tanks, artillery, and supplies critical to the invasion. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen aboard felt the weight of anticipation, knowing the coming hours could decide Europe's fate. The ocean was indifferent, yet beneath its surface, currents and waves shaped the battlefield in ways unseen. The American and British navies advanced in disciplined formations, a coordinated armada striking with overwhelming force. Battleships and cruisers led, their massive guns poised to destroy fortified coastal positions. Destroyers flanked the transports, ready to intercept enemy vessels or submarines. Radar operators scanned the horizon, while sonar technicians listened for the faint hum of underwater hunters. But German defenders remained hidden and lethal. As dawn broke, the first artillery salvo erupted, cutting across the beaches with deafening intensity. Explosions tore through sand, concrete, and steel, sending clouds of debris into the air and obscuring lines of sight. German bunkers and pillboxes shuddered and cracked under bombardment, yet machine guns and mortars fired relentlessly from gaps, spitting death into advancing troops. Soldiers crouched low in landing craft, gripping rifles as the roar of artillery and crashing waves merged into chaos. Landing craft surged forward, buffeted by waves and gunfire. Marines and soldiers leaped into the surf, wading through waist-deep water as bullets zipped past. Some vessels were struck, engulfed in fireballs that illuminated the dawn sky in orange and black smoke. Others pressed onward, disgorging troops onto the beaches, where every step was a fight for survival. Officers shouted orders over the din, guiding squads into cover behind sandbags, craters, and wrecked vehicles. Tanks followed, rolling through shallow water onto the beach, their steel treads tearing sand and rubble. American Shermans and British Churchills pushed forward, their cannons unleashing destruction on bunkers and machine gun nests. German Tiger tanks emerged from fortified positions, their massive cannons cutting arcs of fire across the beach, striking armor and infantry. Explosions ripped through vehicles and sand, the air thick with smoke, fire, and burning fuel. Above, the sky became another battlefield. Allied fighter-bombers roared in, diving on enemy positions with bombs and strafing fire. Spitfires maneuvered in tight formations, providing cover for Mustangs targeting artillery emplacements. Flak bursts erupted in arcs of black smoke, showering sparks across the skies. Pilots engaged German Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs in deadly dogfights, twisting to evade fire while striking enemy targets. Trails of smoke marked the fallen, the sky itself echoing the intensity of mechanized warfare. The beach became a crucible. Infantry moved with determination, using craters, wreckage, and smoke as cover. Machine guns tore into advancing squads, forcing soldiers to scatter and regroup. Mortars lobbed shells high, landing with devastating effect. Engineers raced forward, clearing mines and obstacles under fire. Medics weaved through the chaos, dragging wounded men to makeshift aid stations, their movements heroic under constant threat of death. Naval gunfire did not relent. Battleships and destroyers hammered German positions with relentless precision. Each explosion threw debris, masking troop movements and creating opportunities for infantry and armor. The combination of naval, air, and ground fire formed a continuous wall of destruction, designed to break German defenses and secure a foothold. By mid-morning, key beach positions were secured, though at immense cost. Tanks and infantry moved inland, pushing past wrecked vehicles, debris, and shell-shattered sand. Engineers cleared barbed wire and mines, artillery observers directed further bombardments, and medics tended to the wounded. German defenders retreated into secondary positions behind buildings, hedgerows, and fortifications, determined to slow the Allied advance. The inland advance brought new dangers. Streets and villages became fortified killing zones, each building a potential nest for machine guns and mortars. Tanks maneuvered through narrow lanes, firing into structures as infantry followed, clearing rooms and alleys. Artillery shells tore apart walls, sending bricks and timber raining down, while the constant roar of engines, guns, and explosions reverberated across the battlefield. Smoke and dust reduced visibility, yet soldiers pressed on, each step forward a testament to courage and determination. Air support remained critical. Dive bombers strafed enemy positions ahead of advancing troops, while fighter escorts engaged German aircraft attempting to disrupt the assault. Anti-aircraft fire erupted continuously, tracer rounds streaking skyward in lethal arcs. Explosions on the ground and in the sky merged into a single chaotic rhythm, where each strike, movement, and decision carried consequences measured in lives and meters of territory. By late afternoon, Allies secured key crossroads and villages. Tanks formed defensive lines to consolidate gains while infantry advanced cautiously into fortified zones. The combined US and UK forces carved a beachhead, but the battle for Normandy had only begun. Resistance remained fierce, each position demanding careful planning, courage, and relentless pressure. Operation Overlord's success depended on the coordination of every unit, the endurance of every soldier, and the application of overwhelming firepower. The day closed with smoke rising from multiple sectors, burned-out vehicles, and shattered fortifications. The sounds of battle faded slowly, leaving the groaning of wounded machinery and distant gunfire echoing across the terrain. Allies held the beach, but the inland advance promised days of relentless combat. Every meter gained would be contested, every building, hill, and field a site of death and heroism. The war in Normandy had begun, and the combined forces of the United States and United Kingdom were determined to see it through, using tanks, airplanes, artillery, and infantry in a deadly, synchronized symphony of war. By early afternoon, the battle had shifted from beach to inland terrain, a jagged landscape of craters, wrecked vehicles, and shattered trees. The roar of engines and gunfire dominated the horizon as Sherman and Churchill tanks advanced in columns across shell-pocked fields. Each tank fired relentlessly, targeting fortified German positions, destroying bunkers, and suppressing machine gun nests. The ground trembled with every shell fired, sending plumes of earth, sand, and debris into the air. German tigers and panthers lurked among hedgerows and ruins, their cannons cutting deadly arcs into advancing columns. Explosions ripped through the terrain, sending shockwaves that tossed soldiers to the ground and shattered buildings with unrelenting force. Above, the sky was a battlefield of its own. Allied fighter bombers sliced through gray clouds, diving on enemy positions and strafing infantry and armor alike. Spitfires and Mustangs engaged German Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts in tight, twisting dogfights. Flak bursts erupted in arcs of black smoke and fire, threatening planes while tracer rounds streaked downward to kill troops below. Explosions from both air and ground combined into a symphony of destruction, merging sky, earth, and human courage into a deadly theater of war. Infantry moved in tandem with armored vehicles, navigating debris-strewn roads and destroyed villages. Soldiers crouched behind craters, toppled vehicles, and rubble as machine gun fire shredded the landscape. Mortars lobbed shells high, landing with deafening blasts among advancing squads. Engineers cleared mines and obstacles under fire, their movements precise yet deadly urgent. Medics darted between wounded soldiers, dragging them from the open battlefield to hastily established field stations, where survival depended on speed, skill, and luck. German forces fought with brutal efficiency. Anti-tank crews waited in ambush, firing Panzerfausts at Shermans and Churchills as infantry relied on machine guns and sniper fire to disrupt the advance. Mortars pounded the advancing troops, and every village, hedgerow, and ruined building became a deadly trap. The Allies responded with relentless coordination. Artillery observers called down precision strikes, tanks fired into fortified positions, and aircraft bombed identified strongpoints to clear paths for infantry. Street fighting erupted as Allied forces reached the first villages. Narrow lanes became killing zones, lined with rubble, overturned vehicles, and debris from shell blasts. Tanks maneuvered through destroyed streets, firing into buildings, while soldiers stormed inside, clearing rooms and basements with grenades and rifles. Artillery shells from both sides shook the structures, sending bricks, timber, and shattered glass raining down. Smoke and dust reduced visibility, yet the soldiers pressed on, each meter of ground fought for with determination, courage, and sacrifice. Naval artillery continued to support from the coast, firing inland to suppress enemy reinforcements and destroy entrenched positions. Each shell left massive craters, creating temporary cover for advancing infantry but also leaving deadly obstacles for tanks. Explosions echoed across the countryside, their shockwaves knocking men off their feet and sending twisted metal into the air. The coordination between ground troops, armor, air support, and naval fire was critical, allowing the Allies to maintain momentum despite continuous resistance. Tanks became both shields and spearheads. Shermans and Churchills moved together, covering infantry while targeting German armor and fortifications. Tigers and Panthers struck back with devastating accuracy, shells tearing through vehicles and throwing debris in every direction. Engineers laid smoke screens, cleared mines, and repaired damaged tanks under fire, ensuring the assault continued without pause. Every movement was a calculated risk, where hesitation could mean death and determination meant survival. Air superiority proved decisive. Allied bombers destroyed artillery batteries, while fighter planes strafed supply lines and enemy positions. Dogfights continued overhead, with German fighters desperately attempting to halt the advance. Tracer rounds arced across the sky in lethal patterns, marking the intensity of conflict. Pilots maneuvered aggressively, dodging anti-aircraft fire, exchanging machine gun bursts, and diving to support ground operations, their courage under fire shaping the success of each advance. By late afternoon, key villages and crossroads had been secured. Infantry pushed further into German defensive lines, clearing buildings and establishing fortified positions. Tanks formed protective perimeters around captured zones, while engineers and medics continued their work under constant threat. Despite heavy casualties, the Allied forces maintained momentum, their combined firepower gradually overpowering the determined German defense. The battlefield was a mosaic of destruction. Streets littered with rubble, smoke rising from burning buildings, and craters filled with water and debris marked the path of the assault. Tanks, infantry, artillery, and aircraft moved in a deadly rhythm, each element dependent on the others. Every step forward required coordination, courage, and endurance. Soldiers pressed on, driven by the mission and the understanding that failure was not an option. Nightfall brought temporary calm, but the fight was far from over. The Allies held strategic positions, yet resistance continued in pockets, and the terrain ahead promised further deadly encounters. Artillery fire continued sporadically, and flares illuminated enemy positions as soldiers prepared for the next day. The combined forces of the United States and United Kingdom had made significant gains, but the battle for Normandy was only beginning. Every tank, plane, and rifle remained essential as the Allies pressed forward, determined to secure victory through relentless, coordinated force. Operation Tiger Claw, though inland now, demonstrated the lethal synergy of mechanized warfare, infantry courage, and air superiority. Tanks crushed obstacles and fortified positions, aircraft dominated the skies, and soldiers advanced under a constant hail of fire. The war in Normandy had become a deadly, unyielding chessboard where every meter gained was earned through precision, coordination, and sacrifice. And as darkness fell, the Allies braced for the next stage, knowing that each sunrise would bring another wave of fire, steel, and courage. The morning fog over the contested towns inland hung low, masking the devastation from the previous day. Streets were shattered, buildings partially collapsed, and craters filled with smoke and water marked the path of earlier artillery barrages. Tanks rumbled along rubble-strewn roads, their engines growling in the still, tense air. Sherman and Churchill armored columns moved with calculated precision, their cannons scanning for German Tigers and Panthers hidden behind ruined walls, hedgerows, and barricades. Every movement carried the weight of strategy, as a single miscalculation could leave men or machines destroyed. Infantry surged alongside the tanks, rifles and machine guns at the ready. Soldiers moved from cover to cover, creeping along debris-strewn streets, clearing buildings room by room, and securing strategic intersections. The clash of steel and gunfire filled the air, punctuated by explosions that shook foundations and shattered glass. Mortars lobbed shells over rooftops, landing with devastating effect on advancing troops. Engineers worked under relentless fire, clearing mines and obstacles to open paths for armor and infantry alike. Medics darted forward, dragging wounded men to temporary aid stations amid the chaos. German forces were relentless in their defense. Anti-tank crews waited behind barricades, firing Panzerfausts at advancing Shermans and Chichels. Machine gun teams occupied ruined buildings, targeting anyone moving through exposed streets. Mortars and artillery fell sporadically, sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. Snipers picked off officers and key personnel, forcing squads to adopt cautious, calculated movements. Every step forward required coordination and courage. Every hesitation could result in deadly consequences. The tanks engaged in brutal duels. Tigers and Panthers fired massive shells at Shermans and Chichels, tearing through armor and throwing steel and debris across the battlefield. Allied tanks responded with coordinated fire, targeting enemy vehicles, fortified buildings, and bunkers. Smoke and dust filled the streets, obscuring lines of sight and turning the battlefield into a chaotic maze of fire and steel. Infantry worked in tandem, using tanks as cover while suppressing enemy positions and clearing fortified structures. Above, the skies continued to rage with aerial combat. Allied fighter bombers sliced through clouds, diving on German armor and supply lines. Spitfires and Mustangs engaged enemy aircraft in twisting dogfights, their tracer rounds streaking across the sky as flak erupted from anti-aircraft batteries below. Bombers delivered payloads on enemy strongpoints, toppling walls, destroying vehicles, and creating smoke screens for advancing troops. The combination of air support, artillery, and armored assault demonstrated the deadly coordination that defined the Allied strategy. Infantry units advanced cautiously into fortified neighborhoods. Each street, intersection, and building was a potential trap. Tanks fired into doorways, windows, and barricades while soldiers cleared interiors with grenades and rifles. Explosions from artillery and mortar fire added to the chaos, sending rubble and debris cascading into streets. Engineers moved swiftly, dismantling mines and booby traps while under enemy fire, ensuring that armored columns could continue their advance. Medics navigated the battlefield, retrieving wounded men amidst shells and gunfire. Naval support still contributed from offshore, firing inland to suppress German reinforcements and artillery positions. Each shell created massive craters, temporarily shielding advancing infantry but also leaving treacherous obstacles for tanks. Explosions echoed across the cityscape, shaking structures and sending smoke spiraling skyward. Coordination among ground troops, armor, air support, and naval artillery was essential. A misstep by any element could leave units isolated and vulnerable. The German defense adapted rapidly. Reinforcements moved through hidden alleys and paths, attempting counterattacks to reclaim lost positions. Mortar and artillery fire rained down unpredictably, forcing Allied soldiers to constantly adjust formations and advance in staggered, coordinated movements. Anti-tank teams launched surprise attacks on Shermans and Chichels, targeting weaker flanks while infantry fired from concealed positions. Every advance required suppressive fire, tactical foresight, and the courage to push through intense resistance. By late afternoon, Allied forces had begun consolidating gains in key urban zones. Sherman and Churchill tanks formed defensive perimeters around captured neighborhoods, while infantry patrolled streets and cleared buildings. Engineers repaired damaged armored vehicles, while medics continued life-saving work under fire. Despite casualties and destroyed equipment, the combined forces maintained momentum, using every resource at their disposal to press forward against the determined German defense. The battlefield had become a theater of coordinated destruction. Tanks, infantry, and artillery moved as one, supported by air strikes and naval bombardments. Explosions, smoke, and tracer fire painted a vivid picture of relentless combat. Streets once quiet now bore the scars of mechanized war, with vehicles wrecked, buildings demolished, and terrain reshaped by continuous shelling. Every meter gained reflected the relentless determination and coordination of Allied forces. As night fell, sporadic gunfire and flares illuminated the destroyed urban landscape. Soldiers dug temporary defensive positions, tanks remained alert for counterattacks, and medics treated casualties amidst the ruins. The Allies had secured significant portions of the city, but the German forces had retreated only to regroup, and the battle was far from over. Every dawn would bring another wave of destruction, a test of endurance, and a continued struggle for every street and intersection. The mechanized warfare had proven deadly. Tanks crushed obstacles and enemy strongpoints, aircraft dominated the skies, and infantry pushed relentlessly forward under fire. Each element worked in harmony, a symphony of firepower and strategy, where every explosion, every shot, and every maneuver contributed to the slow, grueling capture of the city. Operation Tiger Claw, now fully inland, demonstrated the lethal combination of courage, coordination, and precision that defined Allied success. By the end of the day, smoke and flame rose across the battlefield, craters and destroyed vehicles littered streets, and buildings stood partially collapsed. Yet the combined forces of the United States and United Kingdom had established control over key urban sectors, paving the way for further advances. The war had shifted from open fields to urban combat, from coordinated beach assaults to street-by-street warfare. Every tank, every plane, every rifle, and every artillery shell played a role in this deadly, synchronized march toward victory. As dawn broke over the battered towns and villages, the battlefield was a scarred landscape of craters, burned-out vehicles, and partially collapsed buildings. The combined US and UK forces had secured critical urban zones, but German defenders regrouped behind fortified positions, ready to mount counterattacks. Sherman and Churchill tanks rumbled through debris-strewn streets, their engines growling as they scanned for concealed enemy armor. Every advance required coordination between infantry, armor, artillery, and air support, each element relying on the other to survive the relentless German fire. Infantry units moved with precision, keeping low behind rubble, wrecked vehicles, and craters, rifles and machine guns ready. Grenades and Molotov cocktails were used to flush out stubborn defenders in buildings, cellars, and alleyways. Mortars lobbed shells over rooftops, landing among enemy concentrations with devastating accuracy. Engineers moved forward under fire, clearing mines and obstacles to ensure that armored vehicles and supply columns could advance without interruption. Medics worked tirelessly, navigating the chaos to evacuate the wounded to temporary aid posts, where every second could determine survival. German forces had not lost their resolve. Anti-tank teams concealed in ruined structures fired Panzerfausts at Shermans and Churchills, targeting weak points in armor. Machine gun teams and snipers fired relentlessly, creating kill zones in streets and open areas. Mortars and artillery struck unpredictably, forcing Allied troops to adjust formations constantly. Even amidst heavy bombardment, the defenders launched counterattacks, attempting to retake lost positions and disrupt the Allies' rhythm. Every step forward was met with resistance, every advance a calculated gamble under the constant threat of destruction. Tanks became both shield and spear. Shermans and Churchills rolled forward, firing on German fortifications while providing cover for infantry. Tigers and Panthers countered with devastating fire, sending shockwaves across the battlefield as shells tore through vehicles and walls. Smoke, fire, and debris obscured lines of sight, turning streets into chaotic, deadly mazes. Infantry pressed on, using tanks as cover while clearing buildings and suppressing enemy positions. Engineers patched damaged vehicles and removed explosives to maintain momentum. Air support remained critical. Allied fighters engaged enemy aircraft overhead, strafing German positions and supply lines. Dive bombers targeted artillery batteries, bunkers, and armored concentrations, leaving smoke and rubble in their wake. Flak bursts erupted in arcs, threatening both air and ground units, while tracer rounds from both sides crisscrossed the skies. The combination of aerial assault, artillery fire, and mechanized ground units created an unrelenting, coordinated assault that gradually overwhelmed German defenses. Artillery duels intensified. Allied forward observers called in precise barrages on enemy strongpoints, while German artillery attempted to disrupt advances with counter-battery fire. Explosions sent clouds of dust and smoke into the air, obscuring movement but also providing temporary cover for advancing infantry. Tanks fired through gaps in rubble and barricades, blasting enemy positions with coordinated strikes. Every strike, every maneuver, and every shot contributed to the gradual breaking of the enemy's fortified lines. By midday, the Allies had advanced to critical intersections, securing roads and supply routes essential for the continued push inland. Sherman and Churchill tanks formed protective perimeters around captured zones, while infantry patrolled streets and cleared remaining resistance pockets. Engineers repaired vehicles, cleared mines, and reinforced positions. Medics continued to evacuate the wounded under relentless fire. The momentum of the assault began to favor the Allies, as coordinated firepower and relentless pressure began to erode the German defensive resolve. Street fighting remained intense. Narrow alleys and ruined buildings became battlegrounds where every corner and doorway could hide enemy fire. Tanks fired into fortified structures to suppress defenders, while infantry moved room to room, clearing basements, attics, and hidden alleys. Mortars and artillery pounded both front lines and suspected enemy positions, reshaping the battlefield with each strike. Explosions sent debris raining down, forcing soldiers to adapt continuously to shifting terrain and hazards. German forces launched sporadic counterattacks, using surprise and familiarity with the urban terrain to harass Allied movements. Anti-tank teams targeted vulnerable flanks, while machine gun nests and snipers picked off exposed troops. Mortars and artillery struck in waves, attempting to break the momentum. Yet, the combined firepower of the US and UK forces, coordinated with air support and artillery, gradually suppressed these efforts, allowing the Allies to consolidate their gains and press further into enemy-held areas. By late afternoon, strategic breakthroughs were achieved. Key neighborhoods, crossroads, and supply routes were captured, allowing the Allies to link previously isolated positions. Tanks and infantry worked together to secure flanks, ensuring supply lines and communication channels remained intact. Engineers continued clearing mines and rubble, while medics maintained constant care for the wounded. Aircraft patrolled overhead, ready to respond to enemy movements and provide support for the next phase of the assault. The battlefield was a mosaic of fire, smoke, and destruction. Streets filled with debris, craters, and burning vehicles marked the path of the Allied advance. Tanks, infantry, artillery, and aircraft operated as a coordinated force, each element supporting the others in a deadly rhythm. Every explosion, every shot, and every movement contributed to the gradual collapse of German defenses. Soldiers advanced with determination, knowing each step gained came at a high cost but was essential for the success of the operation. Nightfall brought temporary reprieve but did not end the fighting. Sporadic gunfire, flare illumination, and distant artillery fire reminded soldiers that the battle would continue at first light. Tanks maintained watch over captured positions, infantry dug defensive lines, and medics prepared for the next wave of casualties. The Allies had achieved significant gains, but resistance remained. Each dawn would bring renewed attacks, testing endurance, coordination, and courage in the relentless push toward victory. Mechanized warfare, infantry assaults, and air superiority had combined to break through key German defensive lines. Tanks crushed obstacles, aircraft dominated the skies, and infantry pressed forward under constant fire. The relentless coordination of all elements allowed the Allies to maintain momentum, despite destruction, casualties, and the ever-present threat of counterattack. Operation Tiger Claw had transitioned fully into a massive, multidimensional assault, demonstrating the lethal precision and determination of the United States and United Kingdom forces. By the end of the day, smoke rose over the battlefield, burned vehicles littered streets, and buildings stood half destroyed. Yet, the Allies had secured critical positions, paving the way for further advances into enemy territory. Every meter of progress came from coordination, firepower, and courage. Tanks, planes, artillery, and infantry had worked as a single, relentless force, illustrating the deadly and synchronized nature of modern mechanized warfare. The battle for Normandy was far from over, but the Allies' grip on the inland towns and streets had grown stronger, marking the beginning of a decisive phase in the campaign. The morning mist hung low over the rolling fields and shattered towns, obscuring the German fortifications that had slowed Allied advances for days. Sherman and Churchill tanks rumbled forward, their engines growling as they approached a series of strategic rivers that divided the countryside. Infantry followed in tight formations, rifles ready, their eyes scanning for enemy positions concealed among the debris and trees lining the river banks. Engineers led the way, placing temporary bridges and clearing obstacles, knowing that crossing the rivers under fire would test every ounce of courage and coordination. German defenders had fortified the river banks with barbed wire, mines, and bunkers, placing artillery strategically to cover the crossing points. Tigers and Panthers lurked in concealed positions, their massive cannons trained on potential crossing sites. Machine gun nests fired relentlessly, forcing soldiers and engineers to move with precision and speed. Mortars lobbed shells across the advancing lines, landing with deafening impact, sending water, debris, and shrapnel into the air. Every attempt to cross required careful planning, suppressive fire, and the combined strength of armor, infantry, and artillery. Sherman's and Churchill's provided crucial cover, firing on enemy fortifications while moving into positions that allowed infantry to cross. The ground shook with every shell fired, sending debris from destroyed bunkers raining down into the rivers and onto the surrounding fields. Smoke and dust created temporary concealment, but visibility remained perilous. Engineers worked under constant fire, constructing pontoons and temporary crossings while medics moved among the infantry, evacuating casualties through a deadly gauntlet of bullets and explosions. Above, the skies roared with aerial combat. Allied fighter-bombers targeted artillery positions and German armored concentrations, strafing infantry and providing cover for engineers attempting the river crossings. Flak erupted in arcs of sparks, threatening aircraft and revealing enemy defensive positions. Dogfights between Spitfires, Mustangs, and German fighters painted the sky with tracer fire, twisting and diving in a deadly ballet. Bombs and rockets tore through bunkers and enemy armor, leaving craters and rubble in their wake, opening paths for the advancing Allied forces. Infantry moved with calculated determination, using smoke, debris, and the occasional shell crater as cover. Machine gun fire shredded the landscape, forcing soldiers to scatter, regroup, and advance in measured waves. Mortars fell intermittently, keeping pressure on German positions while allowing tanks and engineers to support the crossings. Every meter gained was a mixture of courage, skill, and sheer determination, as the soldiers pressed through the chaos of mechanized warfare. German defenders launched sporadic counterattacks, attempting to halt the crossings with well-coordinated fire. Anti-tank teams fired Panzerfaust at approaching Shermans and Churchills, while machine gun teams targeted exposed infantry. Mortars and artillery struck with lethal precision, creating temporary kill zones that slowed the advance. Yet, the Allies relied on combined arms. Tanks fired on bunkers and fortified positions, artillery barrages suppressed enemy fire, and air strikes disrupted reinforcements. The relentless coordination of these forces gradually overcame resistance. By midday, several river crossings were successfully established. Infantry poured across pontoon bridges while tanks moved into forward positions to provide cover and suppress enemy artillery. Engineers continued to expand crossings, repair vehicles damaged under fire, and clear mines to ensure supply lines remained operational. Medics moved tirelessly through the crossfire, dragging wounded men to safety and administering immediate care. The successful crossings marked a crucial step in pushing deeper into enemy-held territory. Street fighting resumed as the Allied forces reached fortified villages beyond the rivers. Narrow lanes and destroyed buildings became deadly traps. Tanks maneuvered carefully, firing into fortified structures while infantry cleared interiors with grenades and rifles. Mortars and artillery shells shook buildings, sending debris and dust cascading into streets. Engineers cleared explosives, repaired vehicles, and reinforced positions, while medics treated casualties amidst constant threat. Each advance required coordination, courage, and adaptability, as the terrain itself became a battlefield. Nightfall brought new challenges. Sporadic gunfire, flares, and tracer rounds illuminated streets and riverbanks, turning the battlefield into a deadly labyrinth. Tanks maintained watch over captured positions while infantry dug defensive lines. German defenders used darkness to stage ambushes, firing from concealed alleys and ruins, but Allied coordination held. Aircraft patrolled overhead, ready to respond to counterattacks, while artillery observers called down precise strikes on suspected enemy positions. The combined force of tanks, infantry, artillery, and air support allowed the Allies to consolidate gains and prepare for renewed assaults at first light. The battlefield was a chaotic symphony of destruction. Sherman and Churchill tanks crushed obstacles and enemy positions, infantry pushed forward under relentless fire, and air support dominated the skies. Every element relied on the others. Engineers, medics, artillery, and aircraft worked in unison to maintain momentum. German defenders fought tenaciously, but the relentless advance of Allied forces gradually wore down resistance, clearing the way for further incursions into enemy territory. By the end of the night, critical river crossings had been secured. The Allies had established forward positions, linking isolated units, and securing supply routes essential for continued operations. Streets and villages bore the scars of artillery, tank, and aerial bombardment. Smoke rose from burning vehicles and destroyed fortifications, creating a grim testament to the intensity of mechanized warfare. The United States and United Kingdom forces had demonstrated their lethal coordination, combining tanks, infantry, artillery, and air power in a deadly, synchronized assault. Every meter of ground gained was a hard-won victory, a testament to the determination, courage, and discipline of the Allied forces. Tanks, planes, artillery, and infantry had worked as one, a deadly and precise combination that gradually eroded German defensive strength. Operation Tiger Claw had transitioned fully into multidimensional warfare, with river crossings, fortified positions, and night operations highlighting the deadly complexity of modern mechanized combat. The Allies pressed forward, knowing that every successful crossing and captured village brought them closer to breaking the enemy lines and achieving decisive victory. Dawn broke over the shattered cityscape, revealing streets choked with rubble, burned-out vehicles, and buildings reduced to skeletal shells. The combined US and UK forces prepared for a full-scale urban assault, where every alley, street, and building could hide deadly enemy fire. Sherman and Churchill tanks rumbled forward, treads crushing debris and sending clouds of dust into the air. Their cannons scanned for German Tigers and Panthers, ready to engage in lethal duels within the confined, twisted streets. Infantry followed closely, rifles raised, moving in disciplined formations despite the chaos surrounding them. German defenders had fortified every possible position. Anti-tank teams waited in ruined buildings and collapsed walls, ready to strike Shermans and Churchills at close range. Machine guns tore through streets, snipers perched on rooftops fired at advancing officers, and mortars lobbed explosive shells into open squares and intersections. Each meter gained required careful coordination between tanks, infantry, engineers, and artillery. Engineers cleared rubble, dismantled mines, and repaired vehicles while medics navigated the chaos to evacuate the wounded. Every movement carried immense risk. The battle quickly escalated into brutal mechanized duels. Tigers and Panthers fired massive shells into streets and buildings, sending steel, concrete, and debris flying. Allied tanks responded with coordinated volleys, targeting enemy armor and fortified positions. Smoke, dust, and fire transformed streets into smoky mazes, reducing visibility and intensifying danger. Infantry advanced in tandem with tanks, clearing buildings, suppressing enemy positions, and providing reconnaissance to avoid ambushes. Engineers worked feverishly to ensure mobility, repairing damaged vehicles and reinforcing barricades under constant fire. Air support dominated the skies. Allied fighter bombers swept over the city, strafing German positions, destroying artillery batteries, and targeting supply lines. Dogfights erupted between Spitfires, Mustangs, and German fighters, tracer rounds streaking across the sky in deadly arcs. Bombers dropped payloads on fortified areas, leveling buildings and scattering defenders, while flak bursts erupted in response, sending sparks and shrapnel into the air. The skies mirrored the chaos below, a continuous exchange of firepower, strategy, and deadly precision. Infantry units pushed through streets littered with debris, moving from cover to cover. Grenades and rifles cleared buildings, basements, and attics as soldiers secured neighborhoods. Mortars and artillery pounded suspected enemy positions, while tanks fired through barricades and rubble to suppress resistance. Engineers cleared explosive devices and repaired damaged tanks, ensuring the advance continued uninterrupted. Medics remained a critical lifeline, evacuating casualties while under constant threat. German forces attempted sporadic counterattacks, using intimate knowledge of the urban terrain to harass advancing units. Anti-tank teams targeted flanks, snipers struck officers and machine gun crews, and artillery attempted to slow the momentum. Yet the coordination between Allied armor, infantry, artillery, and air support proved decisive. Tanks covered advancing troops while artillery and bombers neutralized fortified positions, gradually breaking German resistance and securing key streets and intersections. By midday, Allied forces had captured critical sections of the city. Tanks established defensive perimeters around secured neighborhoods, while infantry patrolled and cleared remaining enemy positions. Engineers repaired and reinforced infrastructure, cleared mines, and ensured mobility for armored units. Medics treated casualties under fire, while artillery observers called in precise strikes on suspected enemy concentrations. The city had become a mosaic of destruction, with streets littered with wreckage, smoke rising from burning vehicles, and buildings reduced to rubble. Mechanized duels intensified as Sherman and Churchill tanks faced off against Tigers and Panthers in close-quarters combat. Cannons roared, shells ripped through walls, and explosions threw debris across streets. Infantry advanced alongside tanks, using smoke and rubble for cover while clearing buildings and suppressing enemy fire. Engineers patched damaged vehicles, removed obstacles, and reinforced positions to maintain momentum. The combined firepower and coordination of all units gradually wore down German resistance, turning the tide of urban combat. Air support remained relentless. Fighter-bombers strafed enemy positions, bombers leveled fortified structures, and dogfights continued overhead. Tracer fire from both sides illuminated the streets below, providing deadly guidance for artillery observers. The integration of air, armor, and infantry created a synchronized, multidimensional assault that allowed the Allies to maintain pressure and gain ground despite determined German defenses. By late afternoon, the Allies had secured strategic districts and key supply routes. Tanks and infantry formed coordinated perimeters, ensuring that captured zones remained under control. Engineers reinforced bridges, cleared streets of obstacles, and repaired vehicles damaged during the assault. Medics continued their tireless work, saving lives amidst relentless fire. The momentum favored the Allies, who now controlled critical urban zones, setting the stage for further advances and decisive engagements. Nightfall brought tense calm, but sporadic gunfire, flares, and tracer rounds illuminated the destroyed city. Tanks remained alert for enemy counterattacks, infantry patrolled streets, and medics treated the wounded. German defenders regrouped in isolated pockets, using darkness to stage ambushes, but Allied coordination and firepower kept them at bay. Aircraft patrolled the skies, ready to strike at enemy movements and support ground operations. The battlefield was a deadly symphony of firepower and strategy. Tanks crushed obstacles, infantry advanced through destroyed streets, and air support dominated enemy positions. Every element relied on the others. Engineers, medics, artillery, and aircraft worked in unison to maintain momentum. German resistance persisted, but the relentless advance of the Allies gradually eroded their strength. Every meter gained was a testament to coordination, courage, and sacrifice. By the end of the day, the Allies had secured most of the city, though pockets of resistance remained. Streets were scarred with destruction, craters and debris marked the path of advancing tanks, and smoke rose from countless fires. Operation Tiger Claw had demonstrated the lethal combination of mechanized warfare, infantry courage, and air superiority. Tanks, planes, artillery, and soldiers had worked as a single, synchronized force, gradually breaking German defenses and paving the way for decisive victory. The sun rose over a shattered urban and rural landscape, casting long shadows over streets choked with rubble and fields pocked by artillery fire. The Allies were preparing for the decisive phase of their advance. Sherman and Churchill tanks rumbled forward, engines growling, their treads crushing debris and fallen masonry. Infantry followed in disciplined formations, rifles and machine guns raised, moving with cautious determination. Engineers laid temporary bridges across damaged streets and repaired key infrastructure, knowing the upcoming assault would test every ounce of courage, coordination, and firepower. German forces had dug in along every conceivable line of defense. Anti-tank teams waited in ruined buildings, concealed in craters, or behind hedgerows, ready to strike any advancing Sherman or Churchill. Machine gun nests fired relentlessly, snipers perched on rooftops targeted officers and support personnel, and artillery barrages erupted unpredictably across the battlefield. Every meter gained required precise coordination between tanks, infantry, artillery, and air support. Engineers worked under constant fire, clearing explosives and ensuring armored units could continue their advance. Medics navigated the chaos, retrieving the wounded amidst the maelstrom of battle. The mechanized duels escalated. Tigers and Panthers targeted advancing Shermans and Churchills, shells tearing through streets and fortifications, sending debris flying in every direction. Allied tanks returned fire with lethal precision, targeting enemy armor, bunkers, and strongpoints. Smoke and dust choked the streets, reducing visibility, yet infantry pressed forward alongside armor, clearing buildings, securing intersections, and suppressing enemy fire. Engineers repaired tanks, cleared mines, and reinforced barricades, maintaining the momentum of the offensive. Above, the skies were a battlefield of their own. Fighter bombers roared over German positions, strafing infantry, destroying artillery, and leveling strongpoints. Spitfires and Mustangs engaged in twisting dogfights with Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts, tracer rounds streaking across clouds and streets alike. Bombers dropped payloads with devastating accuracy, creating craters, destroying bunkers, and opening paths for advancing ground forces. Flak bursts erupted unpredictably, threatening aircraft and revealing enemy positions below. Every maneuver, dive, and strike added to the deadly complexity of combined arms warfare. Infantry advanced with meticulous coordination. Grenades and rifles cleared buildings, basements, and attics while tanks suppressed fortified positions. Mortars and artillery pounded suspected enemy strongpoints, reshaping streets and fields with each impact. Engineers dismantled explosives and repaired damaged vehicles, ensuring the advance continued without interruption. Medics remained critical, treating and evacuating casualties even under relentless fire. The combination of infantry, tanks, and air support gradually eroded German defenses. German defenders attempted sporadic counterattacks. Anti-tank teams fired Panzerfausts at flanking Shermans, machine guns targeted advancing squads, and snipers eliminated key personnel. Mortars and artillery struck intermittently, trying to halt the momentum of the Allies. Yet, the coordination between armored units, infantry, air support, and artillery proved decisive. Tanks provided mobile cover, artillery suppressed enemy positions, and aircraft neutralized reinforcements, gradually wearing down resistance and allowing the Allies to maintain pressure. By midday, key districts, crossroads, and supply lines were secured. Tanks formed defensive perimeters around captured zones while infantry patrolled streets and cleared remaining resistance pockets. Engineers repaired infrastructure, cleared debris, and ensured mobility for armored units. Medics continued evacuating casualties while artillery observers called in precise strikes on German strongpoints. The battlefield had become a deadly, coordinated symphony of mechanized and infantry operations, smoke, fire, and destruction marking every advance. Urban combat escalated further. Narrow streets and ruined buildings became kill zones. Tanks fired into fortified structures, while infantry cleared interiors, basements, and hidden alleyways. Explosions from artillery and mortars shook buildings and sent debris raining down. Engineers patched tanks, cleared mines, and reinforced positions to maintain momentum. Every maneuver required careful coordination and immense courage, as the German defenders fought tenaciously despite mounting losses. Air superiority continued to be decisive. Fighter bombers and bombers targeted artillery positions, armored concentrations, and supply lines, providing cover for advancing ground units. Dogfights continued overhead, with tracers streaking the sky, illuminating streets below and guiding artillery observers. The integration of air, armor, and infantry created a synchronized assault that allowed the Allies to maintain relentless pressure and gain ground despite fierce German resistance. By late afternoon, major urban districts were under Allied control. Tanks established defensive perimeters, while infantry patrolled and cleared remaining pockets of resistance. Engineers reinforced bridges, cleared roads, and repaired vehicles damaged under fire. Medics maintained a tireless presence, saving lives amidst relentless combat. The momentum of the final offensive favored the Allies, who now controlled critical urban zones and had prepared for the concluding phases of the campaign. Nightfall brought tense calm, though sporadic gunfire, flares, and tracer rounds illuminated streets and fields. Tanks remained on alert, infantry maintained defensive positions, and medics continued their work. German forces regrouped, using darkness for ambushes and sniper fire, but Allied firepower and coordination kept them contained. Aircraft patrolled overhead, ready to strike at enemy movements and support ground operations. Every meter gained was a hard-fought victory, a testament to coordination, courage, and relentless determination. By the end of the day, the Allies had secured most of the city and surrounding countryside. Streets bore the scars of tank fire, artillery, and aerial bombardment. Craters, debris, and burned vehicles littered the landscape, marking the path of the mechanized assault. Tanks, planes, infantry, and artillery had worked as a single, coordinated force, gradually breaking German defenses. Operation Tiger Claw had reached a critical juncture, with the Allies poised to deliver the decisive blow that could end organized resistance and bring victory within reach. Dawn broke over the war-torn landscape, revealing a battlefield scarred by days of relentless combat. Streets were filled with rubble, cratered fields bore the marks of countless shells, and the skeletal remains of buildings testified to the ferocity of the fight. Sherman and Churchill tanks moved in coordinated columns, their treads grinding over debris as they advanced toward the final German defensive lines. Infantry followed closely, rifles and machine guns ready, each soldier aware that today would determine the outcome of Operation Tiger Claw. Engineers moved ahead, clearing mines and obstacles, ensuring that armored units could continue to press the attack with minimal interruption. German defenders, though exhausted and battered, had entrenched themselves in fortified positions, determined to hold every remaining street, bunker, and hill. Tigers and Panthers fired from concealed positions, tearing apart armored vehicles and sending debris into the air. Machine gun nests swept across streets, sniper fire struck from rooftops, and mortars pounded advancing troops. Every step forward required precise coordination between tanks, infantry, artillery, and aircraft. Engineers worked under relentless fire to maintain bridges and clear debris, while medics moved courageously through the chaos to rescue and treat the wounded. The battle escalated into a brutal finale of mechanized duels. Shermans and Churchills engaged Tigers and Panthers in close-quarters combat, shells ripping through walls, vehicles, and barricades. Smoke and dust obscured vision, yet infantry pressed forward, clearing basements, attics, and hidden rooms while tanks provided cover. Engineers repaired damaged vehicles and dismantled explosives, maintaining the momentum of the assault. Every advance was hard-fought, each meter of ground a testament to the skill, courage, and determination of the Allied forces. Air support proved decisive. Fighter-bombers strafed enemy strongpoints, bombers leveled bunkers, and Spitfires and Mustangs engaged German aircraft in the skies above. Flak bursts erupted sporadically, threatening aircraft and marking enemy positions, while tracer rounds crisscrossed streets and fields below. Every airstrike, artillery shell, and tank round contributed to the systematic dismantling of German defenses. Allied coordination ensured that each element, land, air, and artillery, worked in unison to achieve maximum effect. Infantry pushed relentlessly through the final pockets of resistance. Grenades and rifles cleared buildings, while tanks fired into fortified positions. Mortars and artillery pounded enemy lines, leaving streets, fields, and ruins covered in smoke and dust. Engineers reinforced positions and repaired damaged tanks, while medics ensured casualties were evacuated promptly. Each soldier, each crew, and each pilot contributed to the unified assault, displaying courage and determination in the face of relentless fire. German forces launched desperate counterattacks. Anti-tank teams targeted flanks, snipers picked off exposed personnel, and machine gun teams swept streets with deadly accuracy. Mortars and artillery tried to disrupt the advance, but Allied coordination proved overwhelming. Tanks provided mobile cover, infantry pressed forward, artillery suppressed enemy positions, and aircraft neutralized reinforcements. The relentless assault gradually eroded the remaining defenses, leaving German forces unable to sustain effective resistance. By midday, key districts and strategic positions were secured. Sherman and Churchill tanks formed defensive perimeters, while infantry patrolled and cleared the remaining pockets of resistance. Engineers repaired bridges, cleared streets, and ensured mobility for armored units. Medics worked tirelessly amidst ongoing fire, saving countless lives. The Allies had achieved decisive territorial control, forcing the German defenders into retreat or surrender. The battlefield was littered with wrecked vehicles, debris, and smoke rising from the ruins, a grim testament to the ferocity of the engagement. The final push involved combined urban and rural assaults. Tanks rolled through devastated streets, clearing enemy strongpoints, while infantry followed, securing neighborhoods and fortifying positions. Artillery pounded remaining fortifications, while air support neutralized reinforcements attempting to regroup. Every element of the Allied forces operated in deadly synchronization, overwhelming German defenses through coordination, firepower, and determination. As night fell, sporadic gunfire and flare illumination marked the final skirmishes. Allied tanks maintained perimeters, infantry held streets and intersections, and medics continued evacuating the wounded. German resistance had crumbled. Isolated pockets of fighters surrendered or fled into the shadows. The Allies had achieved victory, but the battlefield bore the scars of unrelenting mechanized, aerial, and infantry combat. Every meter gained, every position secured, and every obstacle overcome came at a high cost, yet the courage, coordination, and determination of the United States and United Kingdom forces had prevailed. The aftermath revealed the scale of destruction: streets scarred by tank treads, fields cratered from artillery, and buildings reduced to skeletal shells. Smoke rose from burning vehicles and demolished bunkers, painting a somber picture of the cost of victory. Survivors tended to the wounded, engineers cleared debris, and soldiers consolidated positions, ensuring that the gains of Operation Tiger Claw were maintained. Tanks, planes, infantry, and artillery had worked as one, their coordinated efforts culminating in decisive victory. Operation Tiger Claw stood as a testament to the deadly effectiveness of combined arms warfare. Mechanized units crushed obstacles and enemy strongpoints, infantry pressed forward under relentless fire, and air superiority allowed for overwhelming firepower and precise strikes. Engineers and medics were critical to maintaining momentum and sustaining life amidst chaos. Every element of the Allied forces contributed to the decisive outcome, demonstrating courage, skill, and coordination on a scale rarely matched in history. By the dawn after the final battle, Allied forces had secured total control of the contested region. Streets, fields, and villages bore witness to the immense sacrifice and heroism displayed by soldiers, pilots, and crews alike. Operation Tiger Claw had concluded with decisive victory, breaking German defensive lines and demonstrating the power of coordinated mechanized warfare, combined arms tactics, and relentless determination. The battlefield, though scarred and devastated, stood as a testament to the courage and tenacity of the Allied forces who fought to secure freedom in the Pacific theater. The war would continue elsewhere, but the lessons, heroism, and sacrifice of Operation Tiger Claw would endure in history, a reminder of the deadly precision, coordination, and bravery required to prevail in the chaos of mechanized, combined arms combat.